Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare
Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Kodanita, Jaya Mayapur Shashi, Jaya Kodanita, Jaya Mayapur Shashi. Jaya Shri Tulsina, Jaya Shri Tulsina, Shri Tulsina, Jaya Shri Tulsina. Jaya Giridhari Lal, Jaya Giridhari Lal, Giridhari Lal, Jaya Giridhari Lal. Jaya Nrsimhadev, Jaya Nrsimhadev, Nrsimhadev, Jaya Nrsimhadev. Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Guru Govind ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Shri Kodantai Mahaprashashi ki, Nitai Gaur Premanande. This evening we're gathered here to observe the anniversary of Srila Prabhupada's passing away, 14th of November 1977, according to the solar date, and it falls on today. So this morning in class we spoke a bit about the disappearance of the spiritual master, and we were talking about how in the Bhagavatam it was mentioned, which king was it? Does anyone remember? A certain king had passed away in the forest, and his queen was there also, according to the Vedic way of life, that when householders, even the king and queen, when they reach a certain age, they would become vanaprasthas and they would go and live in the forest, practice austerities together and worship the Supreme Lord. And at one point in this particular pastime, the king passed away and the queen was quoted as crying very piteously. Actually, I should have that here, who is. And Prabhupada mentions that this is how the disciple mourns the passing of the spiritual master. And we talked about how Sankaracharya, when he passed away, Sankaracharya we know to be an incarnation of Lord Shiva, who had a specific mission to preach Mayavadi philosophy, or covered atheism it was called, in order to reintroduce the Vedas. So if everyone probably knows the story, but just a quick recap, is that people were using a particular Vedic mantra to enact wholesale slaughter of animals. And then Krishna appeared as Buddha Buddha appeared in order to teach non-violence. And in essence, because he was such a powerful, influential personality, he told them, give up the Vedas, don't follow that stuff, and just listen to me. So he took them away from the Vedas so that they would stop using that verse, or misusing that verse, to support their illicit desire for eating meat and slaughtering animals in the name of religion. And then he introduced non-violence, so therefore this ahimsa principle was brought into play. And then to reintroduce the Vedas again, then Lord Shiva appeared as Sankaracharya, but he only taught as far as the impersonal concept of God. And at the end of his life, when he was typically an advanced devotee, feels separation from Krishna, and sometimes you hear the devotees thinking, I'm the most fallen devotee. They're praying that I've simply wasted my life knowingly drinking poison. So they speak like that. Typically, Prabhupada would say that the true devotee is the one that thinks everyone else is a devotee, but me, I'm just a wretched pretender. So a true devotee will think like that. He won't think, I'm the best devotee. No one's good, or no one's as good as me. That's not a true devotee, because the decoration of a devotee is humility. If we don't have that humility, then we need to find a way to get that humility, because that is the thing which is attracting to Krishna. And that is the most important quality, most important decoration of a devotee. So at the time of his passing, he was thinking I can't remember Krishna, I am so fallen, etc. like that. And his stupid disciple says, just fix your mind on Brahman. Imagine going to Lord Shiva, who's constantly in meditation on Lord Narayan, and telling, just fix your mind on Brahman. So he says, Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Mudhamati. You fools, just worship Govinda. Your word jugglery will not save you at the time of death. So at that time of passing away, then one of his final things was to chastise his disciples and put them right. So you can see the culmination of his preaching. He clarified it by saying that actually the worship of Govinda is higher. So at the time of death, the spiritual master may have a certain type of mood. Now, we don't know. We can't say what is the mood of the mind of the pure devotee. But certainly we don't go and try to instruct the spiritual master at the time of death out of ignorance. So here, some quotes from spiritual master and disciple. Yes, the daughter of Vidarbha. That was the queen. So this is from the Bhagavatam, 4th canto, chapter 28, text 47 and 52. Translation: The most obedient wife thus fell down at the feet of her dead husband and began to cry pitifully in that solitary forest. Thus the tears rolled down her eyes. And Prabhupada says, just as a devoted wife becomes afflicted at the passing away of her husband, when a spiritual master passes away, the disciple becomes similarly bereaved. So this type of separation is not some mundane lamentation. When Krishna instructs Arjuna, asochanam vasochastam pragyavadam shabashase gadasana gatasam chanana shochanti panditaha, that you are mourning for that which is not worthy of grief. Those who are wise lament neither for the living nor for the dead. So the disciple doesn't assume that type of stone-hearted wisdom, or what we'd maybe call wise. Oh, the spiritual master passed away. Well, he's not the body anyway. Next, when's prasadam? He doesn't take it casually like that. Because the spiritual master is his life and soul. And he thinks that anything good of me is simply by the mercy of my spiritual master. Any faults is mine. This is the way the bona fide follower sees themselves. They don't think that I'm great, and it's only a matter of time before everyone will recognize that once they see how great a devotee I am. They don't think like that. And it's just like yesterday, we were discussing this pastime of the lifting of Govardhan Hill, and Krishna mercifully reduced Indra's pride. And sometimes Krishna does that to us, but he can only reduce it if we're somewhat like Indra at a certain point. He became regretful and he was repentant, and then he was able to re-establish that relationship. So Krishna gives us that opportunity. And following the footsteps of Srila Prabhupada, who considered simply himself, he said, my only qualification is I never changed anything. Now that's such he, in his humility, may say that as if he's done nothing, but can we, if I say to Hoksha one thing and he says the same thing to Pip, who says it to Ashish, and it passes all the way around, by the time it gets back to me, the game of Chinese whispers, right? It could be something completely different. We're not going to play that, but this is often the nature. By the time something is filtered through, a dozen conditioned minds, apologies to any self-realized souls that are sitting here, but by the time it passes through, we hear it one way and we say it, and then someone else hears it another way. And often you'll see that if someone may speak, and then people write notes, and you look at the notes and they get different things from it, and sometimes it's nothing to do with what the person said as well. So we tend to atmanam daryate jagat, that we tend to see things through the filter of our own false ego, and we all do that. We can't say, oh no, I'm perfect. We judge it according to what's comfortable for us to hear, what's acceptable. But Prabhupada says, my only qualification is I never changed anything. Now that's such a valuable quality. No speculations involved. One time there was one aspiring devotee who'd been visiting the temple, and Prabhupada was asking him, so you like it here? And he says, yes. He says, you're going to come and join us? He says, yes, but I have one difficulty. He says, what's that? He said, speculation. He says, so you want to continue or you want to stop it? And he says, stop it. He says, then stop it. It's really that simple, but do we have the courage to make that decision? Anything which we're attached to, which is separate from Krishna, we can just decide that we can let it go or not. But the nature of attachment is it makes us blind. But Srila Prabhupada, he's come to remove that blindfold from us. Sometimes it says the spiritual master is forcing open our darkened eyes. So Prabhupada was forcing open our eyes by this torchlight of knowledge. Out of his compassion, he would speak strongly and straightforwardly so that there's no mistake about the message he's delivering. And then it's up to us how much we take it. So sometimes we've heard Srila Prabhupada referred to as Jagat Guru, and that's not just some kind of fanciful, flowery words. Like sometimes after the name of the spiritual master, sometimes they say 108, which means a auspicious number. And I think it was Janmashtami we quote, or Prabhupada's Vyasa Puja, we quoted, we'd seen some billboard in Vrindavan of such and such Swami, 1008. You know, as if you put an extra zero there makes him much more elevated. You know, so where does it end? 1,000,008, you know, 1,000,000,008. That makes him like, oh, he must be the most advanced spiritual master just because he's stuck loads of nothings on it. And the nothings mean nothing, actually. But Srila Prabhupada's qualification that he never changed anything, and this name of Jagat Guru is that he is actually qualified to deliver the whole universe. It's mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam that the spiritual master is the sum total of all the demigods. Sometimes we think, oh, wouldn't it be amazing if King Indra actually appeared in the temple, or Lord Brahma appeared in the temple, or one of the other chief demigods. We think, oh, that'd be amazing. But the spiritual master, he's actually even more elevated than that. But sometimes we see just with mundane eyes. An example, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and his son at that time, Bimal Prasad, who later became Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada, spiritual master, they were on a train journey. I'm not sure what time, or what age he was at the time. Maybe, Hoksha, you quoted this recently. What age was he at the time? So he was quite young.
Yeah, he was 16, but we got 10.
That's right. So he was certainly less than 16, so at least a year, or maybe some years. So he noticed that his father, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, was chanting japa, and then he appeared to go into some kind of trance. Not just like us, we go into a trance, and it means like basically we're tamed out, we've crashed out, and drool starts coming. This is our type of trance in the mode of ignorance, and not comparable. But so he says, when his father came round again, he says, my dear father, what happened? He says, ask me when you're 16. So on his 16th birthday, he was there and says, okay, so what happened? The Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was known as Shrutidhar. He never forgot anything. He has in his memory, he could retain everything. So he said, actually, I was chanting japa, and I went for a japa walk in the sky, and I met, it was Narada Muni and Lord Brahma, and they were discussing this verse, Apichet Sudaracharo, that one is still considered saintly. Even how can a devotee be considered saintly, even if he performs abominable activities? How he's still to be considered saintly? Krishna says this, and we know it to be true, but how do we understand it? And then these chief demigods turned around and they said, oh, here's Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he'll know the answer. So this is the kind of quality of spiritual masters that we're actually fortunate to take shelter in. That even these great personalities, these demigods, controllers of the material elements, like we can hardly even control getting up in the morning, even when our alarm clock goes off. We have so little control over our own life. And these great personalities, they're taking shelter and taking instructions from these wonderful personalities. Lord Chaitanya, he mentioned that this Krishna conscious movement would be spread in every town and village throughout the world. And what was that verse? Mora Sena Pati Bhakta, is that right? Does anyone remember that verse? Basically, he says that my field generals will come and spread this. So this is Srila Prabhupada. This is the devotee which Lord Chaitanya was talking about. This is Srila Prabhupada. he came and spread it to every town and village. When he arrived in Boston Harbor, and then he composed a prayer, and in that prayer he says, please make my words suitable to the understanding of these people who are grossly under the modes of material nature, passion and ignorance. So he's praying that he'd become a puppet in the hands of the Lord. And he was wondering, how will they be able to accept your message? Please make it suitable for their understanding so they can accept the holy name of Lord Gauranga. So I want to read a little bit about the Final Pastime. So the spiritual master, he's known as Acharya, or one who teaches by example. And it's amazing that, and we're really grateful that those direct disciples of Srila Prabhupada had the foresight to record Prabhupada's words practically from day one. All those lectures in 26 Second Avenue, and they were filming, and so it must have been very obvious to them that they weren't dealing with an ordinary person. We have to record this person's life. There's so many books which Prabhupada wrote, and so many books written about Srila Prabhupada, and recordings, videos, etc. And I'd also like to quote one scholar. I'm not sure if it was Tom, what was that famous scholar? Dr. Judah Stilson. He was one of them. I can't remember if it was him, but it was one of those very famous scholars who's praised Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita. He was a Sanskrit scholar, scholar of Vedic philosophy, and he said, according to the descriptions in the Shastra and the Vedic literatures, then if we look at the life of Prabhupada, we see that he is actually, everything he accomplished, that could only be done by someone who's actually empowered by the Lord. And this is known as Shaktivish Avatar. So Shaktivish Avatar, sometimes it is the Lord directly, and sometimes it is a jiva who's empowered by the Lord. But he said, then the glories of such a person is only seen once in many generations, like once in 1,000 years or something. So he referred to a few people like Jesus Christ, etc. And he says that people don't know how much this person is influencing, is going to influence goodwill upon the planet, and they'll only look back and be able to see in years to come. So he could tell that by Prabhupada's character, by his qualities, by his actions, by his interactions, that he was no ordinary person. And he wasn't a surrendered devotee. He was a scholar, but so even from that platform, that he wanted to glorify Prabhupada by saying this. And from the devotees platform, people, when they met Prabhupada, they just wanted to surrender. There was that, if you read Science of Self-Realization, there's a priest there, a German priest, and he's so impressed by Srila Prabhupada that he immediately just wants to join him. He says, so what shall I do? Shall I just come and join you? And he says, no, you just stay where you are and preach love of God from your own position. So in this way, Srila Prabhupada was very broad-minded. This is Mahatma. Okay, so I just want to read a few words here from Bhakti Churu Maharaj's book, Ocean of Mercy. Ocean of Mercy refers to Srila Prabhupada. So just a few things. Just prior to Srila Prabhupada's departure, these are some of the interactions which went on between Srila Prabhupada and Bhakti Churu Swami. So, to help Prabhupada relax at night, I would massage his feet, and as I did, he often would talk to me One night, sitting up in his bed, as I gave him a gentle massage, he lamented, "There is so much to do, but I have become so sick I am not able to do anything." "Srila Prabhupada," I said, "what you have done is inconceivable. No one has ever achieved what you have. You should not think that there is anything left that you must do. Now you should just relax." Now we just see this is a great lesson for us. Prabhupada did so much. We hear how Prabhupada made so many disciples, opened so many temples, and wrote so many books, etc. Prabhupada said, "Is what I have done is 50%. So such a humble devotee. Yeah? He said the other 50% is to establish Varnashram Dharma, the Vedic organization of society, into 4 social and 4 spiritual orders." I did not know what to say, so I remained silent. "ISKCON is for the devotees," he said, "but not everyone will become a devotee. Not everyone will be able to surrender to Krishna. For those who will not, who will continue to act according to the modes of material nature, in order to situate them in the proper human culture, we need Varnashram Dharma." He spoke like this for quite a while. I understood some of what he said, but much of it flew over my head. Clearly, establishing Varnashram Dharma was not going to be easy or simple. But neither had what Srila Prabhupada already accomplished. But neither had what Srila Prabhupada had already accomplished. No one had ever achieved what he had. Even Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had predicted that the holy name would be spread around the world to every town and village. He had not done it himself. He had left that for one of his very special devotees, Srila Prabhupada. And now to expand his achievement, we had to spread. Do you need someone to hold that, Javit? We had to spread Varnashram Dharma all over the world, every town and village, and thus completing the other 50% of his mission. The rest of the world's population still had to be brought under the umbrella of Vedic culture. And for that to happen, first governments would have to become Krishna conscious. So there's some explanations here we won't go into just now. But essentially it says here, fortunately we had ISKCON to establish pure devotional service. Not everyone would be able to reach a high standard or follow the 4 regulative principles and chant 16 rounds of Mahamantra. They would opt instead for a life of fruitive work and sense gratification. For them, the structure of Varnashram Dharma was an absolute necessity. So it's important because sometimes if people, they can't follow the 4 regs and chant the 16 rounds, sometimes they're humble enough to just live with that. Or sometimes they have sour grapes, "Oh, I can't do it, so nobody can." But that's not the case. So it was clear that Srila Prabhupada would not stay with us forever, and there was some speculation about whom he would appoint as his successor. Some thought it'd be this one or that one. And Srila Prabhupada was approached with this question. His initial reaction was, "My Guru Maharaj did not appoint any successor Acharya, so how can I?" Soon thereafter, he named 10 leading devotees to give initiation on behalf in different parts of the world. But also, we just read this morning from the Spiritual Master and Disciple, he said that actually there's a need for thousands of spiritual masters, and Lord Chaitanya says that everyone becomes spiritual master and deliver everyone. So it's not that we just leave it to a handful of people, and if they don't manage it, we just say, "You're useless, I can't surrender to anyone." Or we don't expect them all to be on the same level of Prabhupada. Prabhupada is a special soul. And so the onus is on all of us actually to step up and try to deliver everyone in this land. And if we can't do that, then at least try to serve that mission so we can work together to fulfill the desire of Lord Chaitanya and fulfill the desire of Srila Prabhupada. So Prabhupada was being treated by one Kaviraj, Kaviraj is a Vedic doctor. And Srila Prabhupada's health started to improve. The swelling of his feet went down, his appetite increased, and though he was still weak, he was not experiencing significant physical discomfort. As he got better, Prabhupada became restless and wanted to go to Vrindavan. He was in Mayapur at this time. So I'm just having to skip a few pages here for the sake of time. So when Prabhupada was going to Vrindavan, Bhakti Sri Swami was with him in Mayapur, and for some reason he didn't have the proper travelling documents. But when Prabhupada got to Vrindavan, he said he called for Bhakti Sri Swami to come and visit him. And Prabhupada knew he was going to be leaving the planet, and he called for Bhakti Sri Swami. So here's, let's see. So one senior devotee was cooking for Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada once said to him, "You have so many things to do, why are you wasting your time cooking for me? You can see I don't have any appetite and not able to eat anything." And the devotee replied, "Srila Prabhupada, I cook hoping that you will get well and develop some appetite and eat something." And Prabhupada said, "I will get well only when I die." So that's an amazing message. If you think getting well means the body will get better, but getting well is getting rid of this body once and for all, come back to Krishna. So hearing that, then Bhakti Sri Maharaj says he no longer could control himself. He broke down in tears. And Srila Prabhupada soothed him like a father. He said, "Is this what you learned from me?" He asked, "Didn't I teach you that the spirit soul never dies? The spirit soul simply changes the body. It transmigrates from one body to another." He was reminding me that he would always be there with us, even if we could not see him. And although Prabhupada was not eating, he was concerned that the devotees were getting nice prasad. Make sure the devotees get nice prasad. It is the only sense gratification they have. Yeah, for all the cooks, take that seriously. Okay. So there was Adri Dharana Das, the president of the Calcutta temple, had heard about Srila Prabhupada's dream. Let's see, it was some dream about some medicine or something like that. Oh, excuse me. So basically, this Kaviraj had diagnosed that Prabhupada's main ailment, according to the body, was malfunctioning of his kidneys. And they gave him various medicines. And this Kaviraj had treated Prabhupada 4 months before. He went to the West, and his condition had deteriorated. When Prabhupada returned to Vrindavan, Vanamali Kaviraj had resumed the treatment, but he had stopped when he saw that his remedies were not working. So he wasn't just meaninglessly giving the medicine, knowing that it wasn't making any difference. Damodar Prasad listened carefully without comment. Then he said that he would prepare something to give to Prabhupada. Although he had been brought to Vrindavan to prepare the Makaradvaj, he didn't mention it but prepared several other kinds of medicine instead. He seemed confident of curing Prabhupada, but when he spoke to us, he expressed serious concern. So when this Kaviraj expressed to Prabhupada that he reckoned he could cure him, Prabhupada responded by saying the medicine could not counteract the laws of material nature, birth, death, old age, and disease. I told Damodar Prasad about what Prabhupada had said about feeling like that when he brushed that aside. When someone feels pain or discomfort, so this is referring to Prabhupada saying he felt as if he was poisoned. He says, I'm not saying that I was poisoned, but I'm saying that sometimes when you feel discomfort, it may appear like that. And he says, don't worry about that. And sometimes that happens. That I remember Ramananda's wife, Janavipriya. I had been to an Ayurvedic clinic in India and brought back some medicines for a few devotees. And she took one medicine and actually it made her much worse. And then, of course, when we consulted the Ayurvedic doctor, he says, stop taking it straight away. Sometimes this is what happens. One was it saying one man's food is another's poison, or one medicine which may cure one maybe actually make another one more sick. So they were just discussing here, and it was mentioned here that the medicine which was given in the wrong way. It was a mistake. But Prabhupada was not concerned. So this Kaviraj Damodar Prasad said, Swamiji, I'm convinced that this is all your pastimes. Just a while ago when I felt your pulse, the beat seemed like that of a dying man, but now it is strong and steady like that of a young man. We could see that his medicines were having their effect. Srila Prabhupada was not eating, but for some time he did not evacuate, but the medicine had started to clean his stomach. That was important. Because of Prabhupada's condition, the body would be flooded with toxins due to kidney failure. He suggested that we do not give Prabhupada any solid food, only diluted milk. So Prabhupada started to take that regularly, and we again had hope for his recovery. So all the while, Prabhupada was telling the devotees, for years that I'm an old man, I may go at any moment. Even in the early days, he was telling this. And the devotees had heard this for years, and they were thinking, yes, but we can't imagine a life without Srila Prabhupada, and he's such a transcendental personality. He could stay for hundreds of years if he wanted to. He's above the modes of material nature. But Prabhupada was telling me, that I can go at any moment, and he was meaning it. And even some of his last instructions were telling the devotees, don't think this won't happen to you. This is the thing that we always think that's right. We see everyone else dying, but we don't think it will happen to us. Or if we do, we tend to just block it out because it's too difficult to think about. But this instruction of Prabhupada, leaving his body, was there for us to give us confidence that we can also remember Krishna at the time of death. We have to simply remember Krishna throughout our life and favourably. So Prabhupada wanted to go on parikram in this condition. He's practically leaving his body, and he wanted to go on parikram in a bullock cart, which would have been a very, very rough ride indeed. If anyone's ever seen some of the roads in Vrindavan, there's more potholes than roads. I think it's been improved a bit now. But the devotees were so concerned, and they were begging Prabhupada, don't go. And he says, but I want to go. I want to see Govardhan. I want to see Vrindavan. But the devotees were so much, some were saying, oh, let Prabhupada do what he wants. Why stand in the way of pure devotees' desire? And some were saying, no, but Prabhupada, if he does this, it will kill him. So both were thinking in different ways, but both had very devotional sentiments. So news of Srila Prabhupada's critical condition was spreading, and anticipating that Prabhupada might soon leave his body, Sriman Narayan Maharaj and Ramakrishna Bajaj came to see him. They were old acquaintances, and at one point they wanted to speak with Prabhupada privately. Before leaving the room, so because the other devotees were asked to leave the room, but before leaving the room, Bhakti Swami pressed the record button of the tape so that they could record that conversation. And in that conversation, Narayan Maharaj and Ramakrishna Bajaj had asked Prabhupada who would be his successor, and Prabhupada told him that he was not going to appoint one, he was giving the legacy to all his disciples, all his followers. A few days later in the evening, several of Srila Prabhupada's godbrothers came to see him. As they sat in chairs around his bed, Prabhupada admitted that he had used strong expressions while preaching. He begged their forgiveness and requested that they ask all the other Vaishnavas to forgive him as well. Srila Bon Maharaj, sitting next to Prabhupada's head, told him that he had been in a position to chastise them and that there was no offence in his action. He expressed his appreciation for Srila Prabhupada's achievements in preaching around the world, fulfilling the prediction of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We've a few things to do for this program. We're going to do an arti for Srila Prabhupada. There's an offering here. I'd also just looked out some nice Prabhupada memories. There's a few things to say, and I don't think it's necessarily appropriate that we're just confined by time. So if we speak a bit later, then so be it, because I think that's more important. We're not going to go into midnight or something like that, but just perhaps a bit longer. So, reminded of a pastime. This is an indication of how Srila Prabhupada is so transcendental. Even from the beginning, he knew what his mission was. Perhaps we all know the story of when Prabhupada's early disciples were in Calcutta, and some elderly Bengali Vaishnava seen them, and he says, wow, you fulfilled the prophecy of my Guru Maharaj, that Western Vaishnavas here in India. And he said, how is this possible? And they said, oh, by the possible of our Guru Maharaj. And then finally, when he got to see who is their Guru Maharaj, and he said, he seen it was Srila Prabhupada, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, and he called him Abai Babu. Abai Babu was known to the Gaudiya Math as being, a very good supporter of the spiritual masters movement, but they didn't consider him to be like one of the big sannyasis, etc. And they had, Srila Bhaktisanta Saraswati would often speak about how Lord Chaitanya's mission would be spread through all the countries in the world. And because they believed the spiritual master, they understood, they would discuss afterwards, like, well, Guru Maharaj said it, so it must be possible, but who will do it? And they were talking like this. And Prabhupada says, yes, it will be done. Yes, we understand because Guru Maharaj said it, but who will do it? He says it will be done. Of course it must be done because Lord Chaitanya said it, but who will do it? He said it will be done, but not by you. So Srila Prabhupada said this when he was still a householder, and then they realized, Abai Babu, you did it. And he knew that he would do it. So he had no doubt from the moment he had met his spiritual master that this is what his life mission was to be, that he was charged with that mission to take the teachings of Lord Chaitanya to every town and village, and he accepted that's what he should do, and he did it. So there's at the time approaching Srila Prabhupada's passing away, many devotees were in Srila Prabhupada's room. They were crowded around him. And Tamal Krishna had told Srila Prabhupada how his books had been translated into Russian, Arabic, and so many other languages, So he was trying to give some encouragement to Srila Prabhupada, and how many temples had been opened, etc. So at one point the group left and Srila Prabhupada started experiencing some pain in his right thigh. He did not usually show his pain, but he was obviously suffering, and he asked me to tie some salt and a piece of cloth, heat it and press it on the area of his discomfort. The compress brought him some relief, but it was heartbreaking for us to see him in that condition, lying on his bed without saying anything. Tamal Krishna, Bhavananda, Upendra and I all went sleepless that night. At around 5 the next morning, right after Mangalarti, Damodar Prasad told me that Srila Prabhupada had not passed urine in 12 hours. If he did not pass soon, in about 14 hours, he would leave his body. I described the situation to Amal Krishna Maharaj, who immediately called a meeting of the senior devotees. He told them about Damodar's report and that Prabhupada had emphatically instructed that nothing should penetrate his body, no needles. Everyone agreed that a catheter should not be used. That's just Prabhupada's request. Don't let me die in a hospital with so many tubes poking into my body. He says this is not a way for a gentleman to pass away. This is not a way for a Vaishnava to pass. So that was his particular request. It was clear that Srila Prabhupada was about to leave his body. The doors of his room, which for months had been closed and guarded, were thrown open and devotees streamed in. Those who could not fit stood outside the large windows next to Prabhupada's bed. Everyone was chanting. I was standing by Prabhupada's head. When from time to time he opened his mouth, I would give him a bit of water. Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj came, and we sat him next to Srila Prabhupada's bed near his head. Pishima, Prabhupada's sister, was sitting on the floor next to him. The kirtan went on non-stop for over 12 hours. I lost track of all time and bodily needs. I just stood by Srila Prabhupada's bed, holding the small silver lota, pouring water into his mouth as he opened it from time to time. At one point, when Srila Prabhupada opened his mouth and I was about to pour a few drops of water, Babaji Maharaj commented, "See, he is still chanting." Though Prabhupada was not making any sound, I could see his tongue vibrating in rhythm. Then Damodar Prasad Shastri, who was standing next to me, said that Srila Prabhupada had left his body. I could not accept that, so I said, "Please check him carefully." He took a small piece of cotton cloth and placed it in front of Prabhupada's nose. It did not move. I told him to use the stethoscope, and he did, but there was no heartbeat. I was on the verge of breaking down, but Damodar placed his hand on my back and said, "Please don't cry. He's going back to Godhead. Let him go. Don't cause any hindrance to his journey back to the Lord." Everybody understood what had happened. Pishima was one of the first to react. Tears started to flow from her eyes as if a water pot had broken. Manihara Das was sobbing, and I told him what Damodar Prasad had told me. Srila Prabhupada is going back to Godhead. Let us not cause any hindrance to his journey back. The devotees kept on chanting. Some left the room. The senior men got together and discussed whether or not to put Srila Prabhupada in Samadhi that night. So Prabhupada's body was placed on his Vyasasana in the temple room, and there was a kirtan led throughout the night. In the morning, they placed the body on a Vyasasana and carried it in procession to all the major temples of Vrindavan, and everyone in Vrindavan came out to honour Srila Prabhupada. And when the procession returned to the temple, Prabhupada's body was placed next to a burial pit. So it's mentioned that in the Shastra, the spiritual master's body is never burned. It's actually kept in Samadhi. Now, it's not that the spiritual master's in ignorance and he thinks he's the body, so don't burn the body. It's not like that. But actually, the devotees put the body into what they call Samadhi Mandir, or Samadhi. They build a temple around that, and this this body is the vehicle which the pure devotee used to serve the Lord and to display his pastimes and show us so many lessons. So the devotees, they consider it desecration to burn that sacred body of the spiritual master. Not that the spiritual master is the body or anything like that. So when you can see the video, we're not going to show it tonight, but it's there. And you see that Prabhupada's his body's been lowered down into the pit, and then they cover it with salt. And back to Swami was so attached to Prabhupada that he didn't want to leave. And as they started putting the salt in the soil, he wasn't getting out of the pit. And then Tamal Krishna Maharaj grabbed him by the hand and yanked him out, because he was thinking, my Guru Maharaj has entered his eternal pastimes, I want to go with him. So he was quite, just like the other day we read that, which Acharya was it again? We can't have Arti for sitting talking. Who's going to do that? Eh? Just wait, will you? No hurry. We'll be there. Just make yourself comfortable, Javat. We were hearing the other day that there was one great devotee. Who was it? Rasikananda. Maybe Rasikananda. Or was it Parameshwara Puri? Anyway, one great devotee. He left his body, and his disciples were having kirtan at that time, and they also just left their bodies. Their bodies just fell to the floor, and they also left at the same time, giving up and to go with their spiritual master. And it's not that they decided to commit suicide or something, but their devotion was so pure and so attached to the spiritual master that when he left, they went with him, part of his eternal entourage. So sometimes the disciples may feel like that, but Prabhupada's teaching to us was that it's more important to be attached to the spiritual master's vani, his instructions, than to the spiritual master's personal association. And he said, if you want to find me, so when the spiritual master departs, he may be gone from our physical vision, but we can find him in his books. And I don't think any of us here met Srila Prabhupada personally, but we all feel very strongly connected because we've read his books and we've applied to some degree some of these things in our life, and it's changed our life for the better. If it wasn't for the better, we'd be doing whatever else we were doing before. So we've all benefited. And sometimes Prabhupada would remind his disciples, if they got a little puffed up about their advancement, he'd say, don't forget, I'm your good fortune. So the spiritual master, he brings us good fortune. And all we have to do is hold on to that. When Prabhupada said, he gave some very merciful benedictions to the devotees. He said, sometimes the devotees would express that for them, coming from their conditioned background, it was difficult to be a pure devotee. He says, just hang on to my dhoti. I've got the key to the back door. I'll get you in. So he knows we're coming from Malecha backgrounds and Yavanas and degraded backgrounds. And according to Vedic culture, we're rejects, many of us. Maybe some of you haven't been so unfortunate. But if you take birth in the material world, you're unfortunate. If you take birth in Kali Yuga, you're unfortunate. But Kali Yuga is also considered to be the best of all ages, although it's the most degraded. It's the best of all ages because of what? Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the Sankirtan movement, Harinam Ekevalam, Kalo Nascheva Gatiranyata, in this age of Kali, the most sure means of self-realization in God consciousness is by chanting the holy name of the Lord. So there's just a little afterword by Bhakti Swami. We were just reading some excerpts from Bhakti Swami. And so as you can imagine, he was devastated at the loss of his spiritual master, as were all the devotees. And he said that the first time Srila Prabhupada came to him in a dream after he'd passed away, it was so real that although in the back of his mind he was aware that he'd departed, he perceived him so clearly that his heart danced with joy at being with him again. He said, I offered my obeisances and held his lotus feet, bathing them with my tears. He lifted me up and asked whether I was chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra on my beads. Unable to speak, I remained silent. He asked me to show him my tongue. When I did, he took hold of it with his thumb and forefinger, and as the thrill of his touch ran through my entire body, he asked me, are you using it to chant the holy name? I tried to say something, but he was still holding my tongue. And then my struggle to speak woke me up. With that wonderful feeling of meeting Srila Prabhupada still vivid in my mind, I sat on my bed and wondered about the meaning of the dream. About the meaning of the dream. What did he want to tell me? It seemed that he was reminding me that Maya would try to hold my tongue and prevent me from chanting, but that I should never stop. No matter the difficulties, I should never stop chanting the holy name. I felt immensely grateful and remembered Srila Prabhupada's assurance that although he would someday disappear from our vision, he would always be present. For a while, in order to lead us onto the spiritual path, he had become visible to us, and then he left our sight to motivate us to move forward toward the spiritual world to find him. So this is just like Krishna. Sometimes he'll appear to a devotee and then he'll disappear from his vision just to increase that longing to be with them. And Prabhupada, one of his parting instructions was that you prove your love for how you cooperate. So our goal in life is to take Krishna consciousness into our own life and give it to others, and to work together to do that. That is our purpose in life. And anything which gets in the way of that, we should reject it as Maya. I remember one time I had to sort out an argument with two devotees, and rather than one devotee getting the blame or another getting the blame, we just said, let's just blame Maya and leave it behind and just carry on with our Sankirtan. And both were very happy to not take the blame and just blame Maya. And that's the kind of case of it, that Maya, in our attempts to be devotees, sometimes Maya creeps in. So if we can just leave that behind and work together to try to do something to please Srila Prabhupada, and we'll get his mercy. Prabhupada was just as the Lord is protective of his devotee, Prabhupada was also protective of the devotees who take risks to preach Krishna consciousness. I'll just finish with the example that when some devotees went to Japan to preach, they weren't very well received and they got kicked out of Japan. And one Indian man heard about this in the newspaper and he was gloating over it. He said to Prabhupada, "Oh, I've seen your devotees got kicked out of Japan." Prabhupada said, "At least they got kicked out." What have you done? At least to go there to try to do something. So Prabhupada, even though he never seen any failure in the attempts of the devotees to move this movement, he says, "And what have you done? You've not done anything to forward this movement 1 inch." So Prabhupada was so grateful, eternally grateful. This is mentioned as one of Krishna's 64 qualities as pious, which means never forgets the good that someone has done. So Prabhupada, he always considered that simply all his disciples were sent by his spiritual master to aid him in his mission to serve his spiritual master. And he was always grateful to them. He never considered that he was their property, but they were simply there to help fulfill the desire of his spiritual master. This is the humble position of Srila Prabhupada. So I think what we can do now is we can have Arti for Kodnitai Pashashi quietly, and we can show some videos of Srila Prabhupada, and then after that we'll have Arti for Srila Prabhupada. Is it okay for your time? Or do you have to do something else? Okay, thanks. So thanks for listening. And would you have some videos there, Raghunath, you can show? So on Prabhupada's appearance day and Prabhupada's disappearance day, then it brings our mind into focus of what Prabhupada has done to help us in our life, what auspiciousness he's brought into our life, and how just to refocus on what is important and try to do something to renew that. Whatever we can do, just like Lord Ram, he was happy to accept the tiny grains of sand offered by the spider into the ocean when they're building a bridge to Lanka. He didn't consider it puny. Other devotees were laughing, and he says, no, this is as valuable as throwing big boulders in. So whatever we can do, doesn't mean to say, oh, well, that's fine, I don't have to do very much then. It's not that, it's the devotion which counts. Okay, so do you have a list of them? Do you want to, or this, will they introduce themselves? Or what?
That's what Tom.
Another $2 million.
Srila Prabhupada ki. ISKCON Founding Church, Srila Prabhupada ki. Jagat Guru, Srila Prabhupada ki.
One time we were having darshan with Srila Prabhupada, and how he was saying, it's a letter. Different parts of the world like Srila Prabhupada, his books, and coming in from different educators and scholars. And there was this one letter in particular that Srila Prabhupada really liked, and he had somebody read it. And this letter, I don't remember who it was from, but it was from a big, big man, big scholar. I think maybe it was someone in one of the big mosques down, in South India. I'm not sure. I think maybe it was the Madhva Math, and the Acharya of that Math. And they was reading it, and this Acharya was saying how these books that Srila Prabhupada has written, how they could not possibly be written. They're so profound, and Srila Prabhupada is so prolific. How someone could do this, being an ordinary soul, is not possible. And this person said, "It is my belief that Srila Prabhupada is Vyasadeva himself." And Srila Prabhupada just lit up with a big smile, and everyone, Jai Prabhupada, Jai Srila Prabhupada. So, we really don't know. We really don't know who Srila Prabhupada is and what he accomplished. No one even came near accomplishing previously, and it's unlikely that for a long time anyone will. Srila Prabhupada was directly, as we know, sent by Krishna, and he came to the most fallen place. And only Srila Prabhupada was empowered with that direct potency of Krishna. Prabhupada once said Krishna asked him to come to the material world. Will you come? Will you go, please, and deliver them? So Srila Prabhupada, though he didn't want to leave, of course he came out of this great compassion. And we saw that. Prabhupada was in Vrindavan, he didn't want to leave. But he came. He came. Now, I've been reading autobiography of yoga, yogi, and all this kind of Tibetan books, all those kind of books that were prevalent in those days, commonly available about yoga, mysticism. So I had a little idea what to expect in a spiritual master. And Prabhupada didn't levitate, or he didn't, flash my eyes or make anything crazy happen to convince me. He just talked me into it. I just never felt so peaceful and at home. But that was my constant desire to be with him all the time as much as possible. It was the best feeling I'd ever had. And I tried every kind of intoxicant there was, every kind of sensual thrill there could possibly be that in those days was available. And nothing matched that peace and tranquility, exhilaration being with Prabhupada. That's what I like. The exhilaration, the excitement of it. He was almost like a pirate, you know. We were all members of his crew. We were fearless too. He told us, that's right, he made it very clear when we were first starting out. You stay high when you chant. You get high when you chant. You get high when you chant. You have nothing to fear when you chant. You have nothing to fear when you chant. Those were his main ways of selling us on this idea. And it worked. I mean, everybody experienced a high. Prabhupada would come down every morning at 7 to the temple room, and every evening at 7. And personally lead kirtan. For an hour, we would have these hour-long kirtans every morning and every night. Just the same old standard melody, none of this fancy stuff, no Namo Vishnu Padaya, no nothing about Gauranatai or anything else, just straight Hare Krishna. And the hippies off the street who were there and the early fledgling devotees would we would get loaded out of our minds. When Prabhupada would stop the kirtan, everybody would just go like this, you know, wow, I feel great. And that's what hooked us. He got us on that. And then he would lecture, but not long ones, 15 minutes, simple. And then he would go upstairs. And every day he did this, week after week after week. We lived a few blocks from the temple, and one time there was no money for rent. I mean, I was working as a carpenter, not making very much, and supporting a family. And a few of the other devotees, like Jayananda was a taxi driver, and he was giving all his money. A few other devotees had jobs that maybe less than 10%. Everyone else was a hippie, you know. So there was never enough money because we were feeding everybody on the street every day, and there was rent to pay and so on. And gas to put in our cars to go out and do programs and so on. So we were really in a bind. There was no money for rent. We were behind about 2 months, and we were in very grave danger of being evicted. The landlord had severely gotten down on us. Malti and I walked out on the street, on Ashbury Street, in front of our place there, one morning early to go to the temple, walk to the temple for kirtan. And there were all these $100 bills blowing down the sidewalk. One after another, we just started running around the street picking up $100 bills. There wasn't a person on the street. No one ever figured out where that came from. But these kind of things, I could always harken back to the magic days of Prabhupada. These are kind of things we began to expect of Krishna. Prabhupada, another thing he inculcated for us from the early days is if you take a risk for Krishna, stick your neck out, spread Krishna consciousness, Krishna must help you personally. And those who see Krishna closest, take the biggest risk for him. And we tested that to the max, and it worked. We got to see Krishna. We got to see $100 bills rolling down the street. This spirit has died down. This spirit has died down. We're too comfortable. For a number.
When he was for a number of reasons. I was a macrobiotic aficionado at that time, and Srila Prabhupada's prasadam was all just power packed with not only taste, but of course, because his hands had touched it, the way that he served the prasad to the devotees was like no meal I'd ever had. There was so much affection that manifested through Srila Prabhupada's distribution. Another side point, each one of the men ate up to 12 chapatis at a sitting. So that means Srila Prabhupada made a minimum of 144 chapatis for base to start, and then went on with whatever else they wanted to. So that was the very first time that I met Srila Prabhupada at lunch. Well, actually, in those days, we were so inefficient at everything that we did, and so incapable of knowing the significance of what initiation meant. And I remember that, of course, at our fire yajna for the marriage, we didn't have enough money to buy butter, so we used margarine. And when Srila Prabhupada tried to start the fire, he picked up a piece of wood and dipped it in. Beautiful Prabhupada's hands were magnificent, long fingers. And he placed it at the top, and held it over the flame, and it went. He did it again. Over the fire, no action. So he looked out very grave and said, "Oh, this marriage will have a very slow start."
He said, originally, I did not want to come here. He said, not to America, but to this world. He said, Krishna asked, I want you to write those books. Come down and write those books. And I said, I don't want to come to that. I don't want to go to that material world. And he said, Krishna said, don't you worry, I'll take care of everything. You write those books. That was the first and only time that I've ever heard or read, I might be wrong, where Prabhupada actually spoke about Krishna speaking to him and how he didn't want to go. And he made that face, his upper lip kind of, I did not want to go to that world. I will take care of everything. You just come down and write those books. The atmosphere when he said that, it was just, it was like nothing I've ever experienced, ever. So, it was fair embankment, and then you go to those fields. So, it was fairly steep, and I got down on the side of the bank and put my arm up, and Prabhupada was leaning on my arm, and excuse me, helped him down the bank. Then he pushed my hand away, like very abruptly. I was like a little shocked. And Prabhupada said, that is the Maya body. He said, they take your help and then push you away. He said, you take the help of the Guru and then you reject the Guru to become God. He said, that is the Maya body. It's simply not even nice to be a Maya body, is what I understand. They have no concept even of manners, on a transcendental level. Take your help and then push you away.
Another similar pastime. Prabhupada was going up this embankment on his walk at Mayapur. And you can find this narrated in the Prabhupada Nectar book. So as he was walking up the hill, one devotee goes to give him a hand up, and Prabhupada said he turned around, he was like a teenager, he was like a young man. He turned around, he kicked this devotee in the chest, and he ran to the top of the hill. He said, you think I am an old man? I'm never Yovana, eternally youthful. The devotee said he never felt so ecstatic. We think, if we try to put a mundane view on that, but so this was another one. Prabhupada would take the opportunity to give the devotees mercy or give him some instruction, just like Bhavananda, he was showing him that, if someone is helping you, you just throw that help away. See, this is my body. So I guess we can stand up and have arti to Srila Prabhupada, and we can chant Jayanilo Premadana. So if everybody would like to stand, we have a garland to offer Srila Prabhupada. And this evening we offered a new set of beads to Srila Prabhupada, which were made by Bhakta Hari Prabhu from Chile. He made them from the old Tulsis, which had passed away many years ago, and from Krunabhavan. Some beautiful beads they were to Prabhupada. So if someone would like to offer Prabhupada the garland, and then we can have arti and we can offer flowers to Srila Prabhupada. So if you don't know this song, then just stand somewhere where you can see the words for it. Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Jai Jai Prabhupada. Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Jai Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jayanilo Premadana Karuna Thakur Jayanilo Jayanilo Premadana Karuna Thakur. Heno Prabhu Kotagela Acharya Tatu Heno Prabhu Kotagela Heno Prabhu Kotagela Acharya Thakur Heno Prabhu Kotagela Acharya Thakur Kamura Swarupuka Sahasanatha Kamura Swarupita Sahasanatha Kahadasaradunata Patita Bhava Kahadasaradunata Patita Bhava Kahamura Bhata Juga Kaha Kavira Kahamura Bhata Juga Kaha Kavira Kahamura Bhata Juga Eka Kale Kotagela Goranatara Eka Kale Kotagela Goranatara Anale Pashivo Ashane Kutibo Mata Anale Pashivo Goranga Gudera Nidi Jayom Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajaka Charishta Shri Samadas Divine Grace Aboy Charanaravan Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki ISKCON Founder Chari Bhimati Founder Chari Srila Prabhupada Ki Shri Guru Parampara Ki Anantakuri Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Namachara Shridas Thakur Ki Shri Sadguru Swami Prabhu's Ki Prem Shri Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sadigora Bhakta Vrinda Ki Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakun Radhakun Giri Govardhana Ki Shri Mathura Vrindavan Dhama Ki Shri Navdik Mahapadama Ki Shri Nilchaujatna Pridama Ki Shri Kunabhavan Dhama Ki Gangamaya, Yamunamaya, Tulasi Devi, Bhakti Devi Ki, Brihat Madanga, Transnana Distribution Ki, Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki, Shri Prasadam Distribution Ki, Shri Kodanitai Maya Prashashi Ki, Shri Tulsinath Maharaj Ki, Shri Girigari Lal Ki, Shri Nrsingadev Bhagavan Ki, Shri Mati Vrinda Devi Ki, ISKCON Guru Vrinda Ki, Nitai Gaur Premanande, all glories to some devotees. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Thanks to everyone for attending this observance of Srila Prabhupada's disappearance. And please try to remain connected with Srila Prabhupada through his instructions and through so many mediums where you can contact Prabhupada. I don't mean like Ouija board, but like hearing, chanting, following instructions, hearing his disciples speak about their personal interactions with Prabhupada. Just like we see Shama Sundarprabhu was talking about the magic days, as they call it, when they began to expect amazing things to happen because they were just always living on the edge of depending on Krishna, just as Prabhupada did. They took that mood. So if we can depend more on Krishna than our own abilities, we'll get somewhere in spiritual life. So I believe there's prasadam being served somewhere. Does anyone know it? Yoga Barn. Okay. So please everyone go and take prasad to your full satisfaction. Prabhupada told the devotees, the young devotees, eat up to the neck. And earlier on we're reading, he said it's the only sense of gratification they have left. In fact, he said for the first 6 months, but some of us been on the first 6 months. We thought he meant the first 6 months of Brahma. Personally speaking. Srila Prabhupada ki, ISKCON, Founder Char Srila Prabhupada ki, Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki, Krishna Kuntai Matprashashi ki, Nitai Gaur Premanande. Modanga playing tonight. Appreciate the Modanga playing tonight.
That was something.
Yeah, we had a bit of a programme for him.
Did you?
I went to his funeral as well.
I didn't know about that TV from you last week. It's the first time I've spoken to TV.